Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the showdown between the Vampire Coast and the Vampire Count. It's going to be a Vampire Fleet Admiral facing off against Manfred von Karstein, and we are on a custom domination map made by Waka Waka 3000. So this map's really awesome. It's called the Road to Vaul's Anvil, and we do, of course, have our map making contest, which is going to be concluding on October 10th. So as soon as that's finished, we'll get all the maps that are being worked on for that contest. We'll show them to you and have a lot of fun. But this took place in a tournament that was held a couple days ago, and it was a tournament that was basically for the purpose of trying out a lot of these maps in multiplayer and seeing how they function. And of all the new maps, which there was a handful, I think there was like 6 or 7 new maps, this one, in my opinion, was hands down the best. It's just absolutely beautiful. Looking up here at the high ground, you do have one objective that can be contested here, and 2 objectives on the low ground, which is pretty cool. I really like it from like a tactical perspective because there's a little bit of a slope back here. So if there's factions that are really comfortable with artillery, for example, they're going to have some line of sight issues. However, they have an option on the low ground. If they want to play artillery down here, they can deploy it from the forest and move it out. You can play artillery right here as well, like mortars, Hellstorm rocket batteries, all that kind of good stuff. However, if you're playing like a ranged faction, right, or a melee faction, I should say, like Khorne, and you don't want to be caught in the shooting gallery, you can play the high ground and then you can use this big flank, go down the hill. You can also flank down here and crash down. I think this map gives a lot of good tactical options, and it's really, really cool. Now, as far as my army goes in this match, it's going to be the Gallows Giant, backed up by the Admiral, and the Black Pariah Pit is just such a good item. It gives you basically 9 Winds of Magic permanently, and also recharges your Winds of Magic, so just super, super cost effective. So we got bombers, pistols in the back, and double Depth Guard Halberd. These guys are one of my favorite tools because they do defeat Graveguard Great Weapons, they deal with Cryptors, they can cut through chaff pretty quickly, and are just a really, really solid piece in your army. So we got 2 Depth Guard in the back, pistol mobs to shoot at SCMs and Cryptors, bombers to clear out chaff, and the Gallows Giant. So that's going to be the game plan. Now for my opponent here, the Great Forsaken here, it's going to be Manfred von Karstein, very standard. Although he brought a lot of spells. I would suppose many Manfred players these days basically just go for Winds of Death and Invocation, maybe Raise Dead as well. Buna and Spirit Leech, a little bit less common. But again, Manfred basically has infinite Winds of Magic with Necromancers. So, he could just kind of enjoy himself there. Skeleton Warriors, Zombies, and Cryptors up on the high ground. It's going to be double Banshee, which is very, very reminiscent of Land Battle. Vampires used to do this. They would go double Banshee, and then they can just prison shank you all game. They can chase down the Gallows Giant. They can chase down your characters. They have 60 movement speed, Frostbite, great armor piercing, which I believe is 100% now. Yeah, not 100%, but yeah, mostly armor piercing. Very, very cool. And on the low ground, it's going to be some direwolves and more zombies and skeletons, and the feasters in the dusk looking to get into the back of my army most likely. So I would wager these guys are here to go after like a Queen Bess, Carronades, mortars, and you know what's scary about that is if I'm defending my artillery with like a crappy zombie or something, these guys can cut through them like butter. 51 melee attack, and also they have really, really good weapons rank. So I do like that quite a bit. I think it's very cool. So we'll do a little bit of fast forwarding while the armies do posture here on the Road to Vaul's Anvil, which is very, very cool. And the first battle, first engagement, I should say, is going to be happening here. So the Gallows Giant going to be lowering its flamethrower and certainly looking to cook some of these skeletons, which feels pretty good. Gallows Giant's a pretty strong, single entity fighting character, so you can get in there and hunt things down. And the flamethrower is like not amazing, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of range poke in this bad boy. He's much better in melee than the other Gallows, the other Necropex Colossus, right? 500 weapon strength, he has a bonus for his infantry, certainly enjoying his best life. Now, skeletons battling here against these zombies, going to be colliding. I do have the superior capture weight, and 2 deckhand mobs, I believe, have more capture weight than skeletons. I'm not 100% sure. But as far as the trading goes, I don't really know who wins this duel. I think deckhand mobs probably win it. I think their stats are a little bit better, and they have more HP, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. Yeah, they definitely have more HP. So they're going to be pretty comfortable. But Fellbat's coming in to shut down some of my shooting in the back. On the bottom, I do have a single Depth Guard as well as a zombie holding that. Feasters from the dusk moving around the side. And the Gallows Giant is now being hunted by the old school land battle tactic. So the 2 Banshees are going to be hunting down the Gallows Giant. And I don't really have any magic damage, to be honest. I, of course, have my caster with the Winds of Death and Invocation, so I was kind of resolved at this point just to ignore these and just like try and run away to the best of my abilities. But the Frostbite certainly hurts. Now, animated Hulks are going to be summoned in. They're like Walmart Cryptors, but they are very cheap. They only cost 500, and you stack them on top of deckhand mobs, and these bad boys can get in there with them crab claws, and they can really, really do some nice work. So going to be continuing to hold these guys back, pulling back the Gallows Giant, using a fat Invocation here, and hoping it'll be enough. Now, this is one of my favorite things to do with Vampire Coast, is Mourngul basically ganks here. So the Mourngul is going to be moving into the side, going after the Skeleton Warriors who are defending the objective, and they both are, anti-infantry monsters, so they should be able to cut through the zombies and steal that objective. Meanwhile, I do have these 2 objectives. The value trading is pretty even. Here up in the sky, Manfred's circling about, and I do have my 2 pistol mobs. A little bit haggard how they're stacked on top of each other, but for the most part, still putting some good DPS into Manfred and causing some problems. Up here, my zombies are crumbling. Cryptors doing a lot of work. Cryptors are just a great unit, but the bombers are really, really really cutting through the chaff. You can see they're able to melt some of the zombie mobs, and the animated hulks should be able to finish the job for a very, very good price point. Now, zombie summoned, most likely going to be moving into my guns to try and shut those down. And on the low ground objective, we do have zombies versus skeleton spears, going to be favoring my zombies, and it looks like it is going to be Graveguard Great Weapons. Now, as a Vampire Coast player, you don't want to be taking that fight. You still would win it, but Depth Guard costs, I think, 300 or 400 more gold, and the Graveguard will trade very well. And if they're being focused with invocations or any sort of healing, it's not going to be pretty. So what I do in reserves is I pull in another Depth Guard and figure, okay, let's like overload this, go for the 2v1 here, and get 2 Depth Guard units beating them down, and that should work out for us, considering we're pretty stable up here on the high ground point. Spirit Leech going down to the Gallows Giant. Flamethrower attack, going to be shooting in. Let's see what kind of damage it does. It feels like it's a little bit lackluster. Like, it's just the tip there, you know. It's not that much, but nonetheless, it does discourage the leadership. Bomber mobs getting some huge value. In the 500 gold animated hulks, that's a really, really good damage sponge right there. However, in the backfield, my opponent with some nice dire wolves, he's able to kind of flank around and shut down my pistol mobs, and the vampire counts are successfully pushing us back on this front. Manfred also going to be dropping another zombie summon to shut down my shooting, and he's just being a real bully right now, just going after the big Colossus right here. But the Colossus might be able to put some hurt on Manfred. Manfred, I believe, is not weak to fire because he has the hunger. It's not like a natural regeneration effect. Here comes the Winds of Death, so I'm going to be casting the Winds of Death there and just absolutely melting the feasters and the zombies. And man, it goes through the other zombies and skeletons. You know, I usually play human factions. I usually play like, you know, Kislev and Empires, of course, my main. And having access to these like overpowered spells and mechanics is just like, it's like playing a different game sometimes. I mean, of course, Empire can beat both these factions, but it just feels like so much more work. Now, Gallows Giant going to be running away from the Banshees. Manfred's going to be hunting down the pistol character, but even the vampire pistol character is going to be relatively stalwart and hard to finish off. And here we do get the 2v1 fight, so it's going to be the Depth Guard versus the Graveguard Great Weapons. And the Halberd variant of the Depth Guard actually don't do badly here. They themselves do have amazing armor piercing, so they can cut through the 90 armor very, very well. And the Graveguard Great Weapons are going to be cut to pieces, and from here the bottom objective should be pretty secure. We did also steal the high ground objective. Unfortunately, my opponent responded very well by sending some skeleton spears. He does also get some direwolves in there. So the Morngulls did steal the point, but that was a big investment. You know, it's 2,000 gold worth of units to get that point, and he's going to be responding with 350, 350, 1,000, right? And that's going to be able to counter these guys pretty well. With the direwolves chasing me, I certainly won't get away, and yeah, so give and take, but it does give me a big points lead, right? I've had him triple cap for quite some time, 576 to 164. Even though the value trading is favoring the vampire counts a little bit, I do have access to healing as well, and we still do have, like I said, a very good stranglehold on the 3 points. So down here in the low ground objective, my caster did run for some support, so we ran on over to the Depth Guard polearms to get a little bit of help, although it looks like they're going after something now, as Manfred will be turning and running, and the pistol character going to be taking a pot shot and does do a little bit of damage against Manfred. Winds of Death going down. It's going to be my Winds of Death, but unfortunately I may have ran my Depth Guard into that. Looks like it was an okay one. Does hit the Skeleton Spears, and the Depth Guard here are able to win the fight. So they clean up those other undead elite units, and now they're going to be moving in, and we should be very, very secure here on the bottom. Meanwhile, in the middle, vampire counts don't always have the best capture weight. You know, if you're looking at mostly zombie and skeleton-based armies, like the deckhand mobs should be able to hold them back, and we do have the Tide of Skilled coming in with these zombie power deckhand mobs. And again, that's good capture weight, so they'll move up there, and that should mitigate their advantage here. In the meantime, we get some Hex Rays coming out. I really like my opponent's playstyle. It's like very different. Like the double Banshee is so rare to see, but it actually ended up being very, very good here. It's been able to shut down the Gallows Giant for most of the game, and has been putting me on the back foot in some regards. However, vampires a little bit behind, skeletons coming up, but the deckhand mobs, I think, reach the objective. It looks like we do. And we still do have the Depth Guard polearms, who are just an absolute linebacker. They've been causing so many problems, and now the Gallows Giant's back online. Flamethrower, go! Optimus Prime here, as he is able to roast some of those guys point blank. I barely did any damage, man. I feel like the Gallows Giant Flamethrower should be buffed. Like, it literally got like an ideal shot against like a weak to fire unit, and it did like 5% HP. Which is so janky. Look at that thing, man. Oh my goodness, it's so bad. Over up on the high ground, a little bit of disaster. The vampire counts are able to wrestle that objective. Granted, their units are very beat up. Those Morngulls, though, they were relatively countered, and it did drop me down in value by about 1,000 behind my opponent. We both have invocations, and on top of that, they were able to at least put up a decent fight before they went out. So deckhand mobs up in the point. I do have some bomber bats here. Bomber bats were sent up to try and clean things out. I only like to bring one in this matchup because if you bring too many, fell bats just outvalue them too hard. But for the most part, they've been pretty useful here. So Gallows Giant, I guess the flamethrower is starting to add up, and here we do have the pistol character also shooting, and the objective probably going to be swinging to the vampire counts here, but it is getting to the point where they would need a triple cap. So in my brain right now, it's kind of like, okay, it's time for the Depth Guard, like Helm's Deep potentially, but what I opted to do was I moved the Depth Guard up to the middle, and they're going to be trying to hold that objective for as long as I can, and then I'll be summoning in more reinforcements and bomber mobs. So even if he sends some chaff to get this bottom objective, the bomber mobs are going to be able to kind of handle them here. So Vampire Fleet Admiral being hunted by Manfred. Manfred is probably a superior fighter. 70, 50, 480. Against, honestly, not that different of a stat line, though, especially considering she does have the pistol and Winds of Death going down once again to clear out some skeletons. And this objective is going to be going to the Vampire Counts most likely, as my Gallows Giant's kind of just struggling to get online. The double Prison Shanks coming in for the Banshees. They got their shivs that they found under their beds there, and they're going to be going after ye old Gallows Giant. And the Frostbite's also pretty good. I mean, that's very nasty. If those two Banshees, I think this is a mistake from my opponent. Like, I feel like the two Banshees, if they had been hunting my Vampire Fleet Admiral, I could have been in some big danger. Like, I don't know how I would have gotten away with Manfred and the double Banshees. Probably would have been dead by now, but Death Guard move up to the point, and they just barely get there before it was too late. And now we get the big capture weight. Obviously, these guys have full capture weight of 5. Looking at the Vampire Army, it's mostly skeletons and some beat-up Cryptors. The other units are kind of moved off the point a little bit, so I'm going to have a huge capture weight advantage here. That's one of the weaknesses of the Vampires is, like, obviously a lot of the stuff they like to spam is the Cryptors have, I think, 3 capture weight. And the other ones do, of course, have expendable capture weight, like zombies and skeletons. We do also resecure the high ground objective, Bomber Mob stable. We got pistols, we got dogs, and some zombies. So we're getting a pretty big points lead here now as the Vampires do get their last push coming out. But, you know, I'm pretty behind in value by about 1,300, and, you know, Vampire Counts have access to healing as well. Zombies moving up, zombies and skeletons and grave guards, so a lot of elite units. And the two Banshees, I believe, did kill the Gallows Giant. So the Gallows Giant was karate chopped, this poor guy. He tried his best, and honestly, I think he got about 1,500 value, so he almost paid for himself. And here we're going to be using the Doggos. The Doggos are going to be zerging in on the old Banshees here, and I figured I need to deal with them and trap them. And the Scurvy Dogs aren't really going to do good damage, and they, of course, will lose to the Banshees, but I just need to trap them. And that's a good tactic. If you guys are in a situation where you have something that, you know, you can't really deal with, just tar pit it with, like, Skeleton Horsemen, with, you know, these dogs here, with Empire Knights, with Skirmish Cav. Just, like, lock them down and keep them from, you know, buttering your bread. In the meantime, Depth Guard and the elite Depth Guard, the pole arms, trading very well, cutting through the Cryptors, but a beautiful Winds of Death from my opponent there. That was very nice. But I do respond to that. I saw it coming. I basically cast an overcasted Invocation to try and keep these Depth Guard fighting because I know I need them here. The capture weight's going back and forth, but again, most of these are expendable units like zombies and skeletons. The Grave Guard have really, really good capture weight, so just trying to get units up there. Nice roadblock, though. Manfred did get a zombie summon, which was able to block some of my reinforcements. Up in the high ground, just going to be Helm's Deep in this point. Skeleton Spears, of course, might be able to capture eventually, but I have 2 pistol mobs and, of course, a deckhand mob, which huge, huge HP pools, and they're just going to be holding on to that point there. Meanwhile, on the bottom, Scurvy Dogs still fighting pretty well against the Banshees. What kind of value did they get? They actually got 239, which I suppose isn't bad. And the Bomber Mobs are going to be able to hold these guys back. So just making a kind of a Helm's Deep against the Vampires here, as we do cast into the Winds of Death there. And it kind of tickles the pickle of some of those units. And I do lose capture weight. I'm down pretty substantially in value now, but we had the objectives, you know, played a little bit better for most of the game. And at the end of the day, that does carry a lot of weight. GG well played to my opponent. I really love that map. I think that map's awesome. Like, I straight up think you could take that one straight to CA and just be like, put this in the game. People will like it. Seems relatively balanced. And yeah, it's great. Now, some of the other maps that we played in that tournament, I'll have some videos reviewing those in the next few days. Some of them were probably not that good, a little bit too many choke points, and some really, really small. Granted, that might be fun for like a brawler type map, to have like a really small kind of like fisticuffs type map. I think it's kind of a cool option. But overall, yeah, I like the build. I think this build would work pretty well on maps like Death Pass, and yeah, I like this matchup. I think it's a fun one. Manfred got 3,600 value, which is pretty crazy. So clearly he had some good Bunas and Winds of Death that I didn't quite see. The Banshees, 1,300 and 1,200. I mean, that's great. That's really, really good. And for my character, 23. Bomber Mobs did okay. Depth Guard just grinding to the bitter end. 1,600, 956. Gallows Giant, despite being beaten down pretty badly by 2 Banshees, still was able to get some value and roast some Cryptors, right? And Pistol Mobs are just so good now. The fact that they have Vanguard deployment is like probably makes them one of the best units for Vampire Coast. Here's the Doggos, and here are the Mournguls. Mournguls didn't get a lot of value. They certainly got shut down in terms of pure value trading, but the fact that they pushed the chaff off that high ground objective, took it, you could see it was one of the elements with which I was able to win the game. However, what I would do in retrospect is I would send a couple, haggard mobs with them because they ended up having to fight Skeleton Spears and Scurvy Dogs alone, whereas if they can stand on top of things and fight, that's where they really shine. So, GG, well played. Fun game. Really, really fun one. We got to see some cool units from the Vampires, and that'll be it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that map. Let me know your thoughts, and we will go from there. Take care, my friends.